So, right, CMON, how you doing? How'd you do the first half of 2025? That's the sound of you hyperventilating into a bag if you're a backer right now. Let's go. So, yeah, the leak, the trader tip, whatever it was that got linked over onto Board Game Geek and Reddit was that CMON is going to be has announced that they're going to be losing somewhere between $6 and $8 million in the first half of 2025. Holy cow. When I've previously covered these numbers, right, we definitely saw some ambiguity in some years that were slightly higher and the revenue that was there and some lower years along the way. Comparatively, they gained 170,000 in the first half of 2024. So they didn't lose money in the first half of 2024, but they did not gain a lot. And now that $2 or $3 million cushion that we were previously talking, adding up some of the sum totals that were available from those previous years, now looks like it's, But the tricky part of this is, and this is where, as much as I love to speculate and officiate and pronunciate, pronounce dead. Anyway, sorry. The tricky part with this is, as we covered with the previous content when I've covered this video-wise and talking about it, that they've sold a bunch of stuff. A bunch of stuff. Now, Reddit was throwing around this $12 million number that no one seemed to be able to source either. So, again, you're not going to get 5 digits for the zombie sides and the, trilogy to Tabletop Tycoon, right? That has to be at least 6 digits. With how proliferative it is, I have to wonder if some of it could be 7 digits as well. But a total of 8 digits in terms of this bringing in, I have a hard time swallowing that pill as well. So this is why people are like, it doesn't account for it. You can't put that in there. The tricky part is, right, I'm not sure how much of this, time-wise, again, because we're now in the middle to end of August, that you can actually account for being in the first half versus the second half. And the unfulfilled projects that were raised on crowdfunding in this way have a sum total of about $21 million in funding. And again, is there smoke? For sure. Is there fire? Yeah, probably. We got some coals simmering and maybe some magma flowing. But is it really that a bunch of these aren't going to get fulfilled yet? And although Reddit said that, yes, I am, refunding all of my pledges. Again, as someone who has invested in DC United, right? You've got Spin Master tied in with that one, especially on the retail side of things. And so for that one alone, I feel like with the incorporation from other companies, unless they have a falling out with some of the other ones unpredictably like they have, I would imagine that one, if we're talking about the unfulfilled ones at this point, is probably one of the safest bets. The other one, Cthulhu Dark Providence, I would also make the argument in that way. That's probably very similarly safe as well. After that, your mileage may vary, and toss it up in the air. I also, again, I mention this because I can't help but get it out of my head. There has to be some deal between GameFound and CMON. So I have to imagine that maybe there's some money that could trickle in to limp along in that way as well. I don't care about their stock price, right? This is capitalistic, investing side of things. It's reflective of their ebb and flow for sure, but the fact that their stock price has gone down, well, these companies most of the time aren't listed in the first place because it would be negligible. So I don't look at that as any great indicator in that way either. At the same time, I guess you have to, going back to what I said, comparing the years of 2020 to 2025-ish on total amount of high-end crowdfunding, is this causation? Is this correlation? And I don't think you can jump to that crowdfunding is dead again. I think there is some element of people being more thrifty, a little bit more cautious. At the same time, when you've got a campaign of Arc Nova raising over $1 million for bling in the first 24 hours, that also speaks to me that you also have people just, needlessly, carelessly throwing out superfluous cash. So I don't think the superfluous cash is not there. I just think it's not being spent in the same way, shape, and form. And truth be told, some of the CMON campaigns have not been up to their standard in a lot of ways. The ones that have, the Marvel Uniteds, the Cthulhu Death May Dies, even the massive Darkness 3 style, have still raised real good. But it's the other ones. It's the riskier ones. It's the non-IP based ones. It's the non-zombie side ones that have been a little bit flatter. Again, I'm not going to go as far in saying like, oh, well, that's the reason, Chris, that Blood Rage Valhalla and Tekken didn't do as good. No, I think that, what the packaging was for both of those and the mechanistic approach to both of them was what people didn't like, right? Like Tekken is in the lines of the light head-to-head battlers. That is not a huge moneymaker. Apart from, yes, Street Fighter's miniature game, right? You look at Ivion, you look at the previous BattleCons or Exceeds. Those aren't breaking the bank. And now, I wondered if Go On Board could rub their magic and their genie, dust on that one. But even they couldn't. So they're going back to The Witcher. Witcher's going to kill it. But that's why I'm looking at that. Blood Rage is slightly new, but I was expecting with Blood Rage a whole new game. Not a reskin and tweaking of mechanics and board in that way and repackaging the, content in different boxes to make people have to buy multiple of things and overlap with what they already have. So I do think that design choice is the reason it's not getting a couple $1 million too. So it's still going to do really well. But again, with that 2021 to 2025 video that I talked about, 1 million is still really good. 30 or so projects a year are doing that. But to be above 2 million, you're basically going from the top 30 to 40 crowdfunding campaigns to the top 10 just with that. And to go beyond that, you're talking, even rarer, airified air in that way. And where I'm going with that side tangent of talking about the other projects is in the same way that CMON has sort of gone with some of those wayward projects that necessarily haven't met that need or met that IP cost fulfillment quota that is essentially necessary, right? Like Mordred was kind of an out there. They also didn't give us a ton of the freaking gameplay, which is also one thing that they have been consistent with. I get this semi-formed rule book, and then I get a not great concept of what all your extras are freaking adding. And at some point, there is a make it or break it of, if I can't tell, I pass. Well, we talked about the failure that has been the Genesis Wars. Honestly, we also have to talk about the failure that was God of War. Again, when you talk about the comparison, like I mentioned, the Witcher style of things. When you even talk about Steamforge and their Dark Souls and the original Elden Ring, not the second one, that's a whole different one. But this, in the form of God of War, was a massive disappointment considering how big this IP was and how much it must have potentially cost. And can you afford to have more than one of those? Similarly, like Metal Gear Solid as well, being in that production that long, IP based, I don't really know what to make of that. The Dead Keep in the same way as Mordred, kind of these halvesies as well. Marvel Multiverse RPG starter set. Does that really pay the bills and keep the lights on? The Adventurers, the same thing. Where are these going? And if you can't entice people with the FOMO, guess what? The FOMO is no-mo. The other interesting aspect of this is that I guess I would love to see, again, the financials of where some of this money has gone. And I have to think some of it went to IP, but how much and to what extent, and how was this managed going so many ways? And this is the biggest problem, right, with the FOMO-driven model, is that now you're using that to prop yourself up. And if you're really staying true to that, then you're not selling at retail. If you're not selling at retail, you're not getting the slow trickle in inklings of things that worked well that way. And that's why Blood Rage was such the surprise selling, because that was trickling stuff in. But the problem with it is, right, if you go back and you negate on your crowdfunding strategy, then it's a double-edged sword. You may get more at retail, but that initial influx of cash from the campaign may drop significantly. And that's the dilemma. It's not truly exclusive then, but can you get enough backing support at the retail side of things without your own shop in that way, like a lot of companies have gone and charging, 30 to 50% more there to make people FOMO in the same way to raise the funds in that direction. But that is passing Peter to Paul, if I screw up that analogy enough. But what I'm saying is you're changing the immediate influx in cash to delayed gratification in cash in hopes of keeping the business model afloat. But when can you make a transition like that? Because if you can't float all of that at the proper time, and you have to wait too long for that secondary to come in, if you switch that over, that could also be the death blow just by trying to change the business model in maybe a more positive way on the retail side of things, which we saw a lot of companies say that they were going to do at the beginning of this tariff motherfucking fiasco by the orange crappy guy in the first place. The only thing we haven't talked about at this point is, well, are they going to sell anything else? Are they going to offload anything, right? We saw them pick up some of the mythic stuff, right? Like Super Fantasy Brawl, like Hell. Both of those, right? Again, but like the Super Fantasy Brawl, for example, you bought an IP. Why did you need the Mortal Kombat? Why did you need the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? You have a perfectly cool freaking looking set right there. Hell, not actually Hell in the game, but hell, just take the previous mythic stuff, rewrap it like Tabletop Tycoon is doing to Blood Rage, and sell that. But you're sometimes, I feel like, overthinking it. We gotta have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. We gotta have something to attract. We gotta upgrade the previous stuff. No, you don't have to upgrade the previous stuff. That's another cost. That's another palette, right? It's the whole reason why you see campaigns don't do standees and miniatures now nearly to that extent, because it's another SKU that they have to account for. It's another design process they have to account for. It's another overhead that they have to account for in all of the good ways, but also all of the bad ways. And so sometimes less is more in that sense. But again, begs the question, like they did to Mythic in those two properties, is someone else going to do that for them? And that's why, I look at Spin Master as the ability to prop up the DC United style of things in that way. But the other ones, there isn't, to my knowledge, in many of those or any of those, that same situation. And so would you have someone who's able to swoop in there and, vulture it away from them for pennies on the dollar? I don't freaking know, but it's at least an interesting conversation. That's all I got. That's CMON, the latest update in the news. I'm still waiting for my Onimaru. Just kidding. That's stuck over in limbo, if it's even actually made. But the designer says it is, so, well, you still won't get it. Anyway, I'll give you that in a different video. Peace out. See you later. Stay classy.